Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I'm the host and editor of Ultiworld, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me, Ultiworld senior editor Keith Raynor. And we got a big show for you today. We're going to be talking, of course, about the US Open that just happened this past weekend. And we're looking ahead to the first two of three PUL regional championships coming up this weekend. Of course, we've got our AUDL picks as well in our contest against all seven. Interview coming up later with Michael Fairley as well from Chain Lightning and the Atlanta Hustle. So thanks for tuning in, and let's dive in here, Keith. So US Open, Seattle Sockeye now has not lost a Triple Crown Tour event since 2018. They have been dominating, of course, winning the championship in 2019, and are now 2 for 2 this year, winning Pro League Challenge in July, and looking pretty comfortable on their way to a win at the US Open.
And I believe I picked them, right? I'm pretty sure I picked them, which feels like at this point, just riding a heavy favorite. It wasn't exactly effortless at the US Open per se, but I still feel like this team has not put their foot on the gas, and they've been good when they're in the games that matter. Beating Machine in the final 15-12. It didn't look like that game was super hotly contested or anything. I think they looked like the better team pretty much from start to finish. So impressive win for Sockeye, and I'd be scared if I'm the rest of the division right now.
I mean, yeah, they didn't really put their foot down on teams super hard, but they also didn't have any games finish within 2 points or fewer. Every win by at least 3 points. They get wins over Machine, Sub-Zero, Condors, Dig, and I think you're seeing a team whose offense is just going to be very difficult to stop. I mean, how about Mac Hecht fitting right in on their O-line alongside Simon Montague and really looking like he belongs out there? I think, in the past, maybe there were questions about Mac Hecht and can he get open in the reset space? I feel like a lot of that stuff is a little bit over talked about anyway, and is from when he was still in college. We're seeing a Mac Hecht that, was the player of the year and, led Brown to a championship and has the throws and all the skills needed to succeed on an O-line like Sockeyes.
Agreed. I mean, there's a chance he will be by season's end, the third or fourth best player on this team, right? That's what we could be looking at from his season performance standpoint, I feel like. And we could be looking at him as a potential top 25 player. I mean, he is on a roll to start the year. And you're right, has not only even more than fit right in, he's fit in, but he's also excelling. I think he's giving them a little bit more from the handler space than maybe they even had last year.
Yeah, and you think about it, they didn't have Matt Rader in the final, and they still beat Machine. I mean, and remember they were missing Dylan Freechild back at Pro League Challenge. They didn't go undefeated at PEC, but they were playing pretty open lines on Saturday, and then when it counted, they looked great. This team, this is the first time in a long time where I feel okay, we're about to see repeat champions at Nationals. It's been a long time, 2010, since we've had back-to-back winners at the national championships. Now there's a lot of season to go. We haven't seen some teams yet. Ring of Fire, it's now confirmed Jack Williams and Ryan Osgar are playing for Ring of Fire. So we kind of knew that was a possibility. Now we know it for sure. The rumors that Jeff Babbitt may play for Ring. So that team, we won't really see till the series. I think maybe they're playing at Pro Championships. Actually, there's no way that's going to happen because they got to be playing in the Atlantic playoffs in the AUDL. But the thing about it is that Sockeye doesn't even look like they're really playing at their maximum capacity yet, and they are still winning by 2 to 3 breaks a game.
And to me, I look at this Sockeye roster, and I feel like we're seeing that transition from the last generation of Sockeye to this new generation. Maybe that began last year, or last club season, I should say, with Dylan Freechild's performance and leading that team. But I feel like now we're kind of turning the page on the previous Sockeye guard, and now the team is going into new hands. And you can put Dylan Freechild and Trent Dillon and Simon Montague at the front of that. But then, we talk about Mac Hecht, and I've been really impressed with DY Chen and the way that he's playing. And then you have some of these younger players, Tony Vaneri, who seems like he's in a great position to do well this season as well and continue to grow. He's 20 years old or something like that. So I think that Sockey's in a nice long-term position, but really you got to be excited about what they can do in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, the championship window is very open for them, and it doesn't feel out of the question that we could see this team win not only this year, maybe next year too.
It's a weird year though, so I'm not writing anything off, but
no.
The market would have them as heavy favorites right now, I feel like.
Machine got to the final, so I mean, that's the expected matchup when you look at the the seeding and you think about what happened in 2019. Machine looked very good. Defense was strong. They couldn't really get takeaways very much against Sockeye in the final, though. Just kind of a classic club, elite offense battle where there just weren't tons of turns and very few breaks, and Sockeye was just that much better. But Machine looked really good. Otherwise, handled the competition pretty comfortably. The defense looks great, and the offense is at a good point at this point in the season.
And that's no surprise. I mean, these players they had a lot of continuity from last year. They have a lot of reps from the AUDL. So, when you see a cohesive group like Keegan North, Paul Arders, Pavel Giannis, that group can operate the core of any offense. I mean, you could put me and you out there with that group, and we'd probably score at a pretty good clip, just because those guys are used to being able to carry the weight. And so I think a lot of it's going to come down to very, very little edges, I think, for them when it comes to talking about competing with these other semifinals quality teams. And what kind of defense can they have? Can they go out there and take the disc away from really top quality offenses like Sockeyes? Because that I think is going to be the ultimate challenge for this Machine squad.
So, when you look a little further down, you start to talk about the semifinals. We both talked about Chain Lightning as a team that had a good chance to make semis, and they did that. They got a win over Rhino. Rhino looking very good. Chain a touch better. Their defense giving Rhino trouble, and they go on to semis. They lose to Machine there 15-10. But I mean, this Chain team is clearly leveled up over the last couple seasons. I mean, we've seen it on display in the AUDL, the Atlanta Hustle, and I'm not sure I'm ready to call this team, a semis team at nationals, but I do think that they're a lot closer than they've ever been to that point, and it certainly feels like a team that's getting into the bracket.
Absolutely, and it's a tough nut to crack to get into that top tier, especially for a team that has a lot of new players in key roles. And
they were in the wilderness for a while,
right?
The last couple of years.
Maybe that wouldn't have been true last year. I think that there was some hype around them last year, and they struggled a little bit with Stubbs' injury. I think that took a lot out of them, but maybe that gave them a little more developmental time for these other players who were in big spots for them. So I'm high on this team as like a challenger, but I'm with you that I think semifinals is probably out of reach for them, but this could be a return to form for Chain, and then they can build on this in the coming years, because it does seem like they have more of a team identity than what we saw from them, 2 or 3 years ago. And I think a lot of that probably comes from the coaching. Having Miranda Roth-Knowles on the sideline and being able to kind of like unite the vision of the team seems to be paying off.
And on the other side of the bracket, I got to eat my words. Like in the preview, I talked about Sub-Zero maybe going in the wrong direction this year. They lose Ryan Osgar. They turn over a bunch of players who were on their O-line. It's like a ton of new guys, lots of young guys. And then they come out here and they go to semis and they beat Pony in quarters, 14-12. And they lose close to Sockeye. I mean, they really looked like the real deal. It does not feel like they've fallen off at all. If anything, they maybe even look a little better. And excellent play from the backfield. And, we know that Cole Jurek is going to continue to grow into, maybe a club star this year. I mean, I have to say, I did not expect to see Sub-Zero in semis, but they were one of the better teams at this tournament.
That is true. Nick Vogt to me is the guy who's like
killing it.
I mean, he has a potential to be an all-club player, I think. He for me feels like the centerpiece of this team, but they do get it done by committee, in particular from the backfield. They lose Josh Klain and Ryan Osgar. And for us, I think that the process of like looking at this team and being like, yeah, they're going to take a step back without all those players makes sense. But the handlers do a great job maintaining possession, setting up the short break throws, and then getting the hands into the playmakers downfield. I'm not going to lie to you though. I'm still a little skeptical on the long term. They just lost so much talent, and that's hard to overcome even with depth. So I'm a little skeptical in the long run, but I think this team is definitely better.
You think it's fool's gold, huh?
Yeah, I mean, home cooking and an early season tournament, like to me that sounds like a recipe for a team to overperform. But I will say they are better than I expected.
Yes,
yeah, and I think they will continue to be better than originally projected. But I'm not confident that they're going to be number 6 in the power rankings by the end of the year or something like that.
And I mean, I think the other big storyline this weekend is what's going on with Pony. They lose in quarters. They didn't look super sharp, Keith. And, we know they were missing some players that are going to make them better later in the year. Ben Yacht's going to join the team. They're going to look different when Grant Lindsley's on the field. But it seems like there's like some bigger structural issues at hand. Like the offense just didn't look comfortable a lot of the time. And the defense is, not what it once was. So, do you still think this team is a semis team when it's all said and done, or are there, alarms going off in New York right now?
Are we seeing Sony, the shame of New York? Is that what we're seeing?
I don't know if we're quite to the shame of New York.
I'm definitely going to get a message from BJ about that, and that's probably going up on the bulletin board. They're just going to replay that clip. There's no way that you can't be concerned about where this team is now, both with the trend from 2018 and 2019, and then now in this year. Yeah, they're missing pieces. I think we can all acknowledge that Grant Lindsley and Ben Yacht add a lot to this team. But some of the stuff that we're seeing doesn't necessarily just go away with those guys coming back, I feel like. That lack of defensive tenacity, this is a team that I think has gotten it done through the system. And now maybe are they missing that shutdown guy? There's no Babbitt, there's no Conrad Schlor. Like those were the guys that they were putting in those crucial D-line positions and letting everybody else kind of like live off the system and enact a system that, they brought to life in a way that was very impressive. But I'm a little concerned that part of their game maybe suffered more. I think the offense can right the ship, but I don't know. Are they going to be able to be that defense that became the signature of the team on their way to a title?
I mean, let's look at the stats. They go 3-3, and they only have one quality win on the whole weekend. They beat Rhino in the last game of consolation, but they lost 14-13 to Rhino in pool play. They lost in quarters to Sub-Zero 14-12, and then they lost to Condors 14-9 in the first round of consolation. 14-9 to Condors. Look, Condors is a solid team, but we're talking about a Pony team that won the championship in 2018. And, just really, like, when you watch the tape, you're like, this team is not convincing. This team does not look like a championship team at all. So I'm not totally sure what the issues are. I mean, too many turnovers. I think Jabron Meeser's still very much a guy that can be that, lock him down defender, get you a huge D. Made the world team in the canceled 2020 Worlds, and so I think there's pieces there, but I worry that the depth isn't the same, and if they're not going to get that elite top end production from the guys that have, taken them there in the past, your Jimmy Mickle, your Chris Kocher, I think that you then have to rely on that next tier of guys. And if that's not working out, I'm not sure where you go from there. So I think there's big problems to solve, to be honest, for a team that obviously has the talent to be in the conversation for winning a championship. They look the furthest from it right now.
I think one of the challenges, though, in kind of writing them out of semis is who do you write in? Sure. And maybe it's just an open spot. Maybe it's like they're more in that tier with your Rhinos, with your Chain Lightnings. Maybe they're more in that group and they look like a quarters team. And so with a fourth slot open, it could be anybody's ball game, and it could come down to matchups. But I agree with you. What do they look like, the 6th or 7th best team at this tournament? I mean, I would probably put Rhino as the 4th best team and then Sub-Zero as the 5th. So yeah, I can't put Pony higher than 6th, I don't think.
I think that's right. And, they lost the games that mattered most against those teams. It's definitely, when we had Jimmy Mickle on after PEC, he talked about like, oh, we got things to work on, we're this, that. And that I feel that's even more strongly after seeing this tournament.
You're harboring concerns about Jimmy in particular.
I think it feels to me like the team kind of relies on Mickle. Like when you think back to 2018 and the offense, I mean, there were literally points where Jimmy Mickle was the reason that they scored the point. I mean, he was the reason they beat Sockeye. I mean, there's almost no question. Like there were almost no breaks in that game, very few. And the most crucial holds down the stretch was Jimmy playing amazing. And that was after his season of basically training full time and playing with Colony. He was in incredible shape. He couldn't miss, all his hucks were hitting, and we're not seeing that same level of performance. And we didn't see it in 2019 either. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if you try to like change things up on the O-line. They already did, right? They put Sam Little back on offense, which I think is a great move, but they still just look a little uncomfortable offensively. So I think, maybe you go back to the drawing board and you say, what should our O-line look like? When are we playing our best? Like, let's look at the points that goes the best. What's happening on those points where like we're not turning it over? I think it feels like a team that still wants to rely on Mickle, but that didn't really work in 2019, and it's not working so far this year. So I think you need to reconsider how you want to structure the offense.
Do they have a lot of flexibility on that front? I mean, if I think you get Yacht and Lindsley back, you lock in. So here's where
that's
your
already
offense
going to make their offense better,
obviously. Right? And it's going to take a lot of pressure off of Jimmy to make plays. But you have Yacht, Lindsley, Jimmy, Sean Keegan, Harper Garvey, Sam Little, Chris Kocher, right? So the only flex spot really is, do you play Sam Little on offense or defense, right? It's obviously an O-line isn't just 7 people, but you can only put 7 of them on the field at a time. So, what room does that leave for flexibility? So some of those guys I think you're going to leave on offense no matter what. Maybe you move Kocher to defense. I don't know. Maybe you play Ben Yacht on defense, especially if he's like missing for a lot of the regular season. Yeah. Where do you put John Randolph in that? I'm a big, I have lots of John Randolph stock, my Robinhood portfolio is filled with John Randolph stock. So I think you figure out how do you make the best of him. I think it's a little bit of a puzzle piece here, but I do think that Jimmy's performance can get a lot better from where he is now when you add in some really nice pieces to his offense and take some of the load off him.
Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, certainly they've still got the talent that you want to pick them to go to semis, but it's some question marks for sure. How about Rhino? What'd you think?
It would look a lot better with Ryan Osgar and Jack Williams.
Yeah.
Rhino's good. I'm still curious about what the long-term outlook for this team is. The Mike Payne Rhino fit, like whose personality takes over there. That part I'm a bit curious about, but they had some roster changes that maybe went under the radar You look at this roster and they get Xander Kuzan-Tice, they get Ted Seither. Those are nice players to add to, a team that I think whenever people talk about Rhino, they talk about the same two people, which is Leandro Marks and Rafi Hayes, who are both really good. And the rest of the team is probably getting a bit overlooked on that front, but it does feel like they could use some more top end talent. And so injecting more of that into the team, I think could be the thing. If we're looking for a team to bachelor their way into getting a rose of the semifinals, then why couldn't it be Rhino?
I have to say they did go 0-3 on Sunday, losing to Chain, Truck, and Pony. So that's not ideal, but they do get the big win against Pony. And, I think that's a good win for a number of reasons, right? Not only are you kind of getting the revenge win against them from 2019 Nationals when you lose on Universe in quarters, but it's a game where Pony's coming in and saying like, hey, we're going to assert ourselves here and show that was like a fluke, and then you get the win. And so that's pretty sweet. But, I think you see with the 0-3 Sunday, pretty disappointing result. That has to feel like, okay, we still have a lot of work to do. I mean, the fact is, it's a fascinating team because they play a much more unorthodox style than most teams, right? They're going to take weird shots. They're going to look deep a lot. They're going to throw stuff that's out of system for a lot of teams, and that works. And then yet they are adding this coach in Mike Payne, who's like the ultra system guy. So how is that going to mesh? I don't know if we have an answer to that yet. I don't think it would be smart to try to take some of the excellent creativity and skill of the players on this roster and players with a lot of experience playing in that very, very good offense at the University of Oregon and say, hey, we're going to try to squeeze all of that out. We're going to be Revolver 2.0. Don't do that. In my mind, I think you need to let that creativity be part of the team, but they still obviously have work to do to play, to be able to go and start to learn how to win, right? This is not a team anybody had on their radar at 2019 Nationals. And then, they almost make semis. So now they're on the radar. They come out, they have a great start on Saturday, and then they lay the egg on Sunday. So how do you build from this going forward? I'm still high on this team. I think this is a quarters team. I think they honestly have a shot at semis. I think it's helpful for them to get a coach with experience, but it does feel like they still have some work to do to, right the ship. It seems like a kind of a roller coastery energy team. So maybe losing early on Sunday caused them to kind of flatten and not play well the rest of the weekend.
Definitely a team to keep an eye on because I feel like their ceiling and their floor are fairly far apart as far as elite top level teams go.
Sure. What else stands out to you from this weekend, Keith?
You look at the middle tier, your Diggs and your Condors. They pretty much perform like that. And not a lot of exciting results. Some close losses to the top teams. I guess you put Truck Stop in that group. Truck Stop beat both Dig and Condors. I'm maybe a little worried about Dig, but again, I like I said before the tournament, I'm trying not to put too much weight on this given the length of the break last time. Are you worried at all about Emerald City? A little preseason hype. They come out and they say hey, we need more shots at elite teams, and then they get their butts handed to them every time that they play an elite team. 15-5 to Dig, 15-8 to Condors. That's not a good look after you kind of angled to play against those teams. But hey, maybe that's why they needed to. They need to get better.
I guess I hope they learned from their 15-8 drubbings.
Yeah, it's kind of a monkey's paw situation. You're careful what you wish for.
For what it's worth, I think the format improved after the complaints from Zach Smith in the leadership of ECU. The original format wasn't particularly fair or smart. Let's be honest, Flash Flood, they were missing some key players. So let's note that. But the hype train has derailed a little bit. I mean, they did not play very well this weekend.
I was never on board with this hype train.
Not on the hype train. Okay.
No, I mean, I get why people were excited, but like, how often do you see just like new teams form out of nowhere that are really good? I think that's fairly uncommon. Everybody wants to be like, oh, look at High Five, but like that was an unusual circumstance where two teams were kind of like blending their cores together. But yeah, I'm not that surprised that Flash Flood in their first ever tournament didn't do that well. I genuinely am concerned about Emerald City as far as like a team that people are, you know, oh, this is a borderline nationals team. You know, maybe they can fight their way out of a tough region, but to go out and struggle to compete with the exact type of teams you're going to have to beat to get into nationals is worrying to me. They should have felt like the best of the rest kind of team.
Their only hope is that Furious can't come across the border.
Yeah, and that's not where you want to be. You know, that's not what this team was formed to do. So
let's just be honest. So, yeah. By the way, Keith, we got some beef.
Oh yeah,
yeah, we got some beef.
Are you sure it's beef, or is it a little more duck?
Maybe it's a little quack quack. But yeah, I don't remember. On the show last week, we mentioned that Mallard 2 was at the tournament. I think we took, you know, we were talking about the US Open and like, okay, so you have Mallard 2 at the tournament. And the Mallard program did not appreciate that. They did not appreciate that. And they really went all in. They were killing us on Twitter. They were making signs, cancel deep look. They were tweeting at us all weekend long. And you know, it's all good fun. Okay, I see you, Mallard. What's going on? Let's take a look at the results. How did Mallard do this weekend, Keith?
Mallard put up a 3-3 showing with an unreported result against Inception. They beat Flash Flood 15-10. They beat Surly 15-7, Overdrive 15-5, and lost handily to Machine, which, you know, that's no shame in that, to Dig 15-11, and to Knights of Knee.
Knights of Knee got him.
The other, Minnesota team, one of the other Minnesota teams down there. Yeah, that's probably the loss that they wish they could have back. They lost by 1.
That's tough. Well, I mean, you know, here's a question, Keith. Are you trying to squash the beef, or are we going all in here?
No, there's look, no one's listening to the show for peace, right? The people want war. So we can go to war with Mallard. I'm down for that.
Losing to Knights and Knees, it's a tough look. It's a tough look to start the weekend. Well, we'll see what you got, Mallard. Maybe we'll make some. We'll have to make some picks later towards regionals about, you know, over under on Mallard's finish.
Maybe we can get a Mallard bet, like a bet against Mallard.
They're out here trying to cancel us, Keith. I don't appreciate that.
Yeah, cancel Mallard. Forget that. Cancel them.
They're never going back to the US Open. It's over. It's over for them.
The US closed.
All right. So, you know, otherwise, I think kind of what you would expect to see. Team still figuring it out a little bit. I have to say this, just kind of like in a big, broad sense, it was really chippy. Like games were chippy. And there was like long conversations, and there was like lots of, you know, people talk about club as this sort of like utopian thing where everybody's, you know, it's self-officiated, not like the AUDL or they have referees. But
do they talk about men's club that way? I don't feel like they necessarily do.
Fair enough. But I mean, really, I feel like I saw more chippiness this weekend than I've seen in the AUDL this year.
Wow.
I really do.
Refs cleaning up the game. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know if it's cleaning it up. I just think it like cuts down on that stuff because you can't just sit there and, you know, make bad calls.
Any specific examples you'd like to highlight? Well, any plays in particular?
I think we can talk about it here. Sean Keegan, 2-hand shoving his defender to the ground in the lane on an upline cut, and then stepping over him. You know, Sean Keegan's a great player, and I feel like in recent years we've seen him be a little bit less hot-headed. But this was Bush League. It was a Bush League play. And I guess the observers didn't see it because it didn't get called. I don't think the commentators noticed it. You know, off the disc, sometimes you don't notice these things. But I mean, it's just I don't know what had led up to that point. Maybe there was some bumping, but like totally unacceptable. And, I just, there's just that kind of stuff honestly should be like retroactively dealt with. Like maybe Sean Keegan should have to miss the next pony game, right? At a USAU tournament. Like it's on tape. You can see it.
You want to go to Secaucus with this one,
Well, I mean, it's just, come on. You can't do that. Like you could argue that should be, if it was noticed by the observers, that could be a straight ejection. Maybe that's too far, but it's definitely a yellow card without question.
Oh, I definitely agree that a card was warranted on the play. I mean, yeah, I literally look at it right now because it was quite popular on Reddit, and yeah, it's not a good look. And I hope Keegan has been like, yeah, that was my bad. Because you got to own that. If you're going to do it on tape, you got to own it. Because the observers may have not seen it, but literally everybody else did.
Yeah, it was bad. But it wasn't the only thing. Like there was just generally like, I don't know if it's because teams have had 18 months off and everybody's just trying to like get out some of the competitive side of themselves. But it just felt like there were a lot of games that were bogged down by calls and nonsense.
It's not fun. Like let's get into stuff that matters. This stuff, the calls and the stuff is just like, why bog yourself down in it and then waste a bunch of time reenacting and stuff? Just like, let's get things moving and just be honest and fair to each other. It's not that freaking hard. I don't know why people make this so hard sometimes.
People want to win, Keith. Let's take a quick look through the YCC results. How about Oregon? So let's just go through here. U20 boys champions, Trainwreck winning over Utah Swarm 14-12. Trainwreck out of Oregon. A great game. Over in the U20 girls division, Downpour from Oregon dominating the 1 seed Washington, D.C. Rogue 14-5.
They really lived up to the name. It was a downpour, that's for sure.
I mean, just a great performance all around from Oregon. And we talked about it last week. This was not a fully attended YCC. But I think even if everybody had been there and you'd had your Triangles and your Bostons and everybody else, these teams still would have competed very well and, been up in the semis mix. Over in the mixed division, wow, Keith, we talked about it. Kentucky Pie Plus, they ran a zone that nobody could deal with, and they just floored everyone. They beat Atlanta's Flatline in the final 12-2. 12-2. So how about that from Pie? They just played great together. Very cohesive zone. We've seen that program really develop extremely effectively over the past few years.
You targeted that Flatline team too. Shout out to you. They played that Minnesota Superior team that I think I picked. They played them in the first game and clocked them.
Trucked.
That nice pick on my hometown Flatline squad, but also obligatory Lula Teal mention. This has got to be the end of her pie career, right? We've witnessed the beginning.
Whenever we were watching her at High School National Invite a couple years ago, she was
like 4 years ago.
She was like 14.
It's got to be. I don't
know. It's probably coming to an end, but it is U20. So.
Yeah, and you know what? Please, Lula, if you're listening to this, go to a college with a team, please.
And Utah also performed very nicely. I mean, they've continued to put out high quality youth programs, and they're getting stronger and stronger. Utah Swarm winning the U17 boys division 15-4 over Minnesota. So, and the U20 divisions also had lots of competitive Utah teams. So that's your YCC rundown. Any surprises for you in all that mix, Keith?
I've got to say, like, I knew there was some Oregon hype coming in the girls division, but to see them just completely outclass a Rogue team that usually we're saying Rogue is doing that to teams, that was definitely the biggest surprise for me. I mean, they put on a clinic out there, and look at the Oregon hype for the Oregon community right now. We just spent a bunch of time talking about Rhino as a potential semifinals team. Portland Schwa.
We haven't had a chance to talk about Schwab.
Right.
I mean, they were a semis team, and they feel like they're even getting better.
They're in a top spot this year. Now you got these Oregon YCC teams. We spent all these years talking about Oregon college programs, and now they're like the least interesting ones out of their incredible community. So maybe we need to put some respect on that Oregon area community.
Yeah, I think you got to. I was out in Bend, Oregon this past weekend. Great city. I look forward to my next visit, and it reminds me a lot of Albuquerque, high desert. So
I was actually supposed to go to Bend for a family wedding, but then what happened. Nobody got to go to a lot of weddings.
We're not gonna speak of it. All right, we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, Michael Fairley from Chain Lightning and the Atlanta Hustle will be joining us to talk about what's going on in Atlanta as that team continues to rise higher. Stay with us. It's Deep Look. Joining us now on Deep Look is captain of Atlanta Chain Lightning, Michael Fairley. Michael, I really want to say welcome back. I feel like you must have been on the show, but I cannot dig into my memory bank. So you tell me, is this your first time or have you been on before?
I think maybe 2017, I covered Florida Winter Classic and maybe came on.
Oh yeah, there you go. As a reporter.
But that was my first kind of forte into journalism for Ultiworld. So
awesome. Well, welcome. We're coming off the US Open, Chain Lightning having its first tournament of the season, first thing in 2 years as everybody's coming back to Club Ultimate. Just general thoughts first and foremost on the US Open and, getting back out there for club competition.
Yeah, it was an awesome weekend. And for us, we had 10 first-time Chain Lightning guys. And some of those are crossovers with the Hustle. But it was good to kind of go out there and just play a tournament as a team and actually have that weekend and get out of Atlanta. So that's the first part. The results are great, right? Like early season tournament, finishing third at US Open, playing some really good teams is also a huge benefit. And the hope is moving forward, we don't just stay stagnant where we were. And we kind of take, this was a really good weekend, but let's continue building towards hopefully October. And then, USAU did a really good job with the tournament. They were on top of it with COVID cards, vaccination status, right? Everything. So, big shout out to them for even making it possible for us to go up to Blaine. And then also I think you've talked about this before, Charlie, is YCC and US Open being together is probably the best decision they've ever made. I mean, being able to go watch Flatline, our YCC mixed team, was a huge boost to the morale of the team and also the community of Atlanta. So
you got to sink the hooks in, make sure they don't travel too far and wide. You don't want them to end up on other club teams, But
imagine if they went to Florida. We can't have
that. We can't have that. Or Dark Side, and Mike D just keeps doing that to us.
Oh yeah, they've got some good ones out there, but
or Carlton, we just keep losing people from Paideia to places.
But you've kept some pretty good talent. You mentioned you have all these new players. I mean, how much did this feel like a continuation of where Chain was, 2018, 2019? Versus you're starting from some sort of scratch?
I would say it's more starting from scratch this season, 2021 in particular, just due to the layoff. And so a lot of what Miranda and our coaching staff for both Hustle and Chain is focused on is the fundamentals, right? Trying to do a back to basics camp per se of hey, here's marking, right? I know this is something that's kind of overlooked in the majority of the season, and then kind of just getting used to the new roles and new skill sets people may have gotten over COVID, right? Some people probably were playing more than others in towns that were safer. And so it's maybe this person has gotten way better at throwing. It should be a plug-in on the O-line, or, you have some college kids that are, Brett Holzmeyer is a great example. It's just burst out into the scene. It's all right, well, Brett's definitely going to be on our D line and it's going to have a big role. So It kind of seems like more of a, starting new from this year, especially since most of these, Chain hasn't been in the semis of a USAU, TCT tournament since 2014, ECC maybe. So it's kind of a brand new experience.
Well, you've already mentioned hustle a couple times here. There's obviously a great deal of continuity between the rosters, the coaching staff, between the Atlanta Hustle. We'll get to the hustle in a sec, and Chain. How much are you relying on the practice and the systems and the, O&D lines from hustle to inform what you're doing with Chain? I mean, did this feel like you were just playing as hustle on a smaller field, or is it like quite different?
I would say there is a good amount of it that is similar. But if you've watched some of the hustle games, John Stubbs is an O-line player one week and then a D-line player the next week, and then Parker Bray. So I think the majority of the systems are the same. But I do think the difference is in the ADL and club, kind of respective to the smaller field, kind of lend to different skill sets being effective. So I think there's a lot of good takeaways and reps we're taking away from hustle, but I do think it will not be kind of, what happens on the hustle is exactly what you'll see on Chain. Like there may be a different zone or something, for example, right? Because the field size helps us in the ADL and also the ability to double team. So it's kind of definitely a different kind of starting point once you get to club with the field size.
Speaking of fields, a different kind of field, the US Open tournament field, like there was a lot of discussion about the formats and getting teams to have a chance to compete against one another. Now, Chain, your schedule, it looks like pretty much didn't change a ton. The only team I think you played that you might have not played was Black Market in pre-quarters. But how did you feel about the change in the schedule? We've heard from a lot of the teams that were on the outside looking in prior to the change, but not a lot from the teams that were getting the opportunities to play a bunch of high-level games before they made the change. Was Chain happy about it? Were you happy about it?
So, first thing is like we didn't have any insight into the schedule either. When we first kind of committed, I believe we thought it was going to be a 12-team US Open. And then it eventually, with the mixed and women's divisions, not fielding enough teams, they expanded it. So until we got the email, much like every other team, like we didn't know what the schedule was going to look like. We were fortunate though, I think, to be the last team in the first power pool, the 9 seed. So like we had a really good pool. And then when it changed after that, we still, got good reps against a really good Sub-Zero team. And obviously Truck Stop was a little shorthanded because of Breeze conflicts that weekend, but still really 2 good, quarters levels national teams in pool play. But I understand, the frustration, especially with the $67 per player fee going up there where like, it gets pricey. I mean, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And if you're traveling from far away, you have to deal with rental cars this year, which is a whole, different logistical challenge. So, no, I completely, sympathize with that. And I think I was glad we saw the format change. And, those teams got good reps in. But we were lucky enough to be in a really great position that we really liked with our pool. So.
Well, so let's take a look at the resume from the weekend. Obviously, you already mentioned you finished third, win against Truck, win against Rhino, split with Sub-Zero, losing in pool play, winning in the third place game, and a 15-10 loss to Machine in semis. How would you assess the teams that you saw, and where do you feel like Chain fits into that echelon?
It's a good question. So it was really hard this weekend because there hasn't been a lot of club tape, like other than the teams that went to Colorado Cup. And then I think there was that round robin scrimmage that Temper and Truck Stop did. So there was a little tape out there, but for Sub-Zero, for example, we had no clue what their O-line was going to be. We were looking at like wind chill film from the AUDL. I'm just like, can we kind of, try to make some guesses? So I think with that, we focused on like kind of our roles and just basically trying to be a really good defensive team this year, because that is where we've struggled, is getting breaks in the past. And against Truck Stop, it was a sloppy game, which really kind of played into our strengths. And I expect to see a different Truck Stop team come October, with all the Breeze guys getting added back in. And they're going to be really talented and not give you the disc a ton, right? Sub-Zero, the game and pool play, they are just a stingy team with the disc. I think y'all saw that with when they played Pony on the stream. Like Tony, Paletto, Andrew Roy in the backfield are just rocks. And then they have a lot of good, solid cutters. Young cutters too, right? Like Cole Jurek's just out of college. Nick Vogt is pretty just out of college. And then they have, I think, a kid that's 19 on their O-line. I forget his name, but he was carving us up as well. So the pool play game, I think we got one turn and one break on sub. They just didn't give us the ball, which is crazy. And then Rhino, I think, was playing a little bit of open lines. Like I think they would play a D line and then an O line. So what I expect from them when they send out their kill lines of Ralphie and Leandro, Chris Strub, like they're gonna be a fun team to watch this year. And Machine's just really good, like really good. So I would say where we fit into the level of open is like we expect ourselves to be a quarters level team. And if we get the right matchup, like breaking into that semis, right? But a lot of this season is about learning how to win again, because we haven't done a lot of that on the club level. The last 2 times we've been to nationals, it's been in the last place game, right? So it's a lot about learning that, getting the new pieces together, and hopefully getting a good matchup in quarters. And just at that point, once you get into quarters, you just got to win one game at a time, right? So
this may be the $1 million question, Fairley, but like what do you feel like separates Chain from teams like a Machine or Sockeye right now? What do you have to do to overcome that gap?
Yeah, if I had the answer to that, we probably would have been working on that like 4 months ago. Is it just like taking Keegan North off Machine? No. Machine has played together for a long time, right? The core of that team is the same that it was in 2019, and probably, depending on what they did over 2020 or so far this year. So their core is pretty stable. Same with Sockeye. So I think those teams have a lot of experience playing together with their sets. So I think what we need to do as a team is kind of figure out what their strengths are and kind of how can we, put them in positions to be uncomfortable. Both teams run pretty heavy junk sets, and their D lines kind of switchy as well. So, and they're really good on a turn, right? They're pretty stingy with it. So a lot of it is about kind of making sure our offense has the right pieces to kind of break down those junk sets with their pump fakes. And then on D line, I think we have a wealth of talent this year where like Christian Olsen, who's normally an O-line mainstay for Chain since he got on Chain 8 years ago, which is crazy to say. He's the oldest vet on Chain, is now a D-line player. And so it's like being able to add those offensive pieces now to our D-line will help us. So, but again, winning against Machine this weekend wasn't our goal, right? Would it have been a nice cherry on top? Yes. But I think winning in October is where it's most important for us. So,
who were the biggest pieces you were missing this weekend? I know Matt Smith was playing in the hustle game. Were there other players that you didn't have on hand?
No. So Matt Smith was the only one that wasn't there this weekend. He was at the hustle commitment, but yeah, it was good. We ran pretty open lines, and our young depth, a couple college guys came out. Coleman Taparo played really well before getting injured in the sub game. Brett Holzmeyer, Dean Ramsey. So yeah, we had most of our team there.
Well, let's take a quick talk about Hustle here. You've now played all the top teams, and you have wins against all the top teams. You beat Raleigh week 1. You get the split with DC. New York comes down. You beat them. You got a big game coming up this weekend, the second game against Raleigh. But playoff locked up. Who are you most afraid of in this Atlantic division? And maybe who do you want to see in the playoffs as you look for a spot at championship weekend?
God, Charlie, you're trying to give me some bulletin board material for all these teams.
Put it up on the board.
I do not want Jeff
there.
Babbitt. I do not want Jeff Babbitt putting something Fairley wrote up on the board. It's like getting hungrier. And like he's been flexing on everyone this year. I think there's a familiarity with Raleigh for just always being in the same division, always playing them. That leads to kind of like a comfort for Raleigh. I would say that kind of with the wins against these teams, and we'll see what happens this weekend against Raleigh, right? Like we played Raleigh the first game of the year after an 18-month hiatus, right? Like we'll see what happens this weekend. But I think with our strategy and kind of when we are at 100%, like, I do like our chances against the top 4, like to be in a game late and have a chance to win, right? Because what we have with our zone is like really sets us apart in the division. So I would say we like our matchups against any of these teams when it comes down to it. I won't say we're going to be winning by 8 or 9 goals, right? I don't think Hustle's ever done that, but we're going to be in a position to win the game in any of these playoff games late, I would say.
Were you surprised at all by the level of success for the Hustle, or like coming into the season, did you have a sense like, wow, this team could be really good? Like I see the pieces there for us to have a great year, or was it like a surprise that you ended up having so much success right out of the gate?
So I think the pickups in the offseason, right? Antoine Davis, John Stubbs. I mean, those people have a lot of gold medals, so that helps. I would say it was kind of hard. I wasn't expecting. It was hard to expect 8-1 because I don't think I knew what to expect from any other team. Like when we first got out there in practices, it was sloppy. There wasn't a lot of good defense being played because like no one had played defense in 8 months or 18 months. So I knew we were talented, but it was just putting the pieces in the right position. And kind of understanding what those new teams in the division would be. But, after the first Raleigh game, there was a little bit of confidence and kind of it was good to continue building and doing things that Hustle hasn't done before, right? Like we are not known for a team that comes from behind at the end of games, like in Boston or going up on a road trip. Like, so the Philly DC road trip was the first time Hustle has ever swept a road trip. So a lot of new things for Hustle this year. And I think the additions were helpful, but I mean, it's hard when you don't have any comparison for a year to see what's going to happen. But I mean, the pickups were important for us, to say the least.
What's it meant to have the coaching of Miranda Roth-Knowles for now a few seasons, and having this continuity this year?
I mean, I can't say enough. I think when she came in to the hustle and chain kind of mindset, it's kind of like a 5 to 7 year plan of kind of getting chain back to that level. And you can see that with, grits, the main defense that we run. Zone was originally like a preventative defense. And now this year it's a block getting defense because we have the pieces in place. And our strategies have grown, and like she's a greater recruiter of talent as well. But I think the most important thing, and that's helpful with Miranda, is like she is very, very good at in-game strategy kind of changes. And so I think that's been very important for Hustle to continue growing this season. But I mean, having her at the helm is, it's can't say enough. I mean, one of the best coaches, out there.
Love to hear it.
Assistant, right? World Games assistant coach.
It's great because she's got tons of experience, and it's been awesome to see her reputation at large start to match what a lot of us knew about her as a coach and as a player too. She's just like the best. So I'm such a big fan. I love fanboy about Miranda. So the zone's really called Grits. So where does the name come from?
I have no clue. But yeah, it's a funny Miranda story. It was one of the DC game at DC away, and it was like right after half. I think they had a 4-minute O point or something against the zone, and at one point in the middle of it, Miranda just starts yelling, "They're never gonna score! They're never!" And it was just kind of one of those funny moments where it's like you see the competitor that Miranda was when she was playing still come out when she was coaching. So it was kind of fun. But yeah, I have no clue where the name comes from. Maybe because we're trying to chunk everything up, and that's a Miranda question, I guess.
What makes this zone effective? I mean, we've seen some zones have success in the AUDL, but it is difficult to cover the space given how wide the field is. But we've seen the zone give trouble to most teams. And so why is it working so well? What has caused it to shift from being just something to slow teams down to actually causing them to turn it over?
How do I say this without giving away any of this? So what I think is really great about the zone is that depending on the personnel that you put in certain places, the zone completely changes its look of what it's trying to take away or what points you can attack. Right. I think we sometimes switch between Ben Maynard and me up front, right? Which are two vastly different players, right? I'm really slow and tall. Ben's very fast, right? So it's like taking away the dump set in that. And I think against the teams we play too, it is very effective against them for particular reasons. Like DC and Raleigh really love to throw 1,000 short passes, right? And kind of try to break you down that way. And so the zone kind of works one way then, but then also you have the New York and the Tampas that try to spread you out and attack different widths. So I think it kind of is with the personnel completely changes the zone look that they're seeing. And it kind of changes over the course of the game too. By the time in the fourth quarter, something looks open and then everyone's throwing tired. They throw something long. I think Tampa was the first time this weekend that any team's thrown under 300 passes against us in a game. And so just by the methodology of more passes you throw, the more likely you're turn it over. So the DC game we won at DC, they threw 426 passes, which is, I think
an enormous amount.
185. And they had a 96% completion rating, right? But they still had 15 turnovers.
4% gets bigger when you throw in that many passes.
Right. And that's the goal.
How big is this Raleigh game this weekend? Is it big because it's a rivalry game? Is it big because of where you are in the standings? Or is it we're locked into the playoffs, so we can just test ourselves and see where we're at?
Are y'all picking us this week? What is it? Is it pick 'em?
We're gonna have to. Yeah, you're pick 'em, and we're gonna have to pick one of you. So if you got any insight, let us know. Don't tell the guys on Saw 7.
I wouldn't say I wouldn't say we're taking the route of we've locked up a playoff spot, and we're just kind of testing things out. I think when we go out there, we're trying to win that game. But I wouldn't say there's any unnecessary pressure on the game itself. It's one of those things we know Raleigh's a good team, and we're a good team, and we're excited to match up, right? I'm excited to see Jakeem Pope versus Fairfax again. Excited to see JP Burns versus Henry Fisher. Christian Olsen versus Alan Laviolette, right? There's a lot of great matchups that are going to be on that field, and we're just hoping to win them one-on-one and go from there. I think if we win this game, home field advantage becomes a big thing for us. And it's a big thing in the AUDL, I would say, especially this year. So would we really like to win this game? Yes. But are we putting undue pressure on it? It's a must win? No.
Well, what as you get ready for the playoffs, what do you do? I mean, it does, I think, change at least the mentality somewhat to know that you're going to be playing in the playoffs. But, you get the loss with everybody gone playing chain. You take a tough loss to Tampa, who were 7.5-point dogs in the game. So that all of a sudden, like, it's not a guarantee that you're going to get a home game. Where do you put your focus these last couple weeks of the season?
Yeah, I mean, with the Tampa game, I mean, those guys fought their hearts out, right? Like, I mean, that was a game through and through. Also, our second largest attendance of the year. So, I mean, really cool to see that from the Atlanta community as well. Kind of regrouping and moving forward. We did our weekly film session with Miranda last night, and it's kind of about learning kind of what Raleigh's going to want to do this week and kind of the right ways to take advantage of it and kind of continue growing. Because the mindset is always, from game one against Raleigh to the last game, which is next weekend against Pittsburgh, is we want to be a better team when we hit that Pittsburgh game, right? And kind of keep ramping up and not kind of stall out. So it's like constantly kind of checking in with the zone, kind of where were we getting attacked last week? How is Raleigh going to attack it, and then our offense kind of making sure that we can, with the pieces that we have for that week, whether it's going to be, Matt Smith on O-line, John Stubbs, Carl Eckwertzel, right, who's, breaking out this year, I guess. What can we continue to do to grow and learn from our previous performances?
So I think last question here, when's the next time we're going to see Chain? Are you going to be out at Pro Champs, or is it like series next?
So unfortunately, Pro Champs, I think, is Labor Day weekend. And that is when
Atlantic playoffs.
The playoffs game are.
Yeah.
So we will be in the playoffs. And next time you will see us is if Ulti World is covering Greenville, South Carolina, East Coast men's sectionals. So I don't know if you guys are going to come down for that, but
you can cover it for us. You can come back to the reporting role.
We hired 60 reporters to cover all of the sectionals this year. I don't even know how many sectionals there are, but sounds good. Well, thanks so much for coming on, and we'll all be looking forward to the Raleigh game this weekend, and see you out there again soon. Maybe at a playoff game in the AUDL at some point. Maybe championship weekend.
That would be awesome. I appreciate it, guys.
Michael Fairley with us here on Deep Look. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Deep Look. Thanks again to Michael Fairley for coming on. Always appreciate talking to Fairley. And he's surprisingly, for somebody who's definitely got takes, he held himself back a little bit in the interview, Keith.
Understandably so, but you can tell that Fairley is an ultimate nerd, and so he's amongst his fellow nerds here.
Absolutely.
On the show.
So let's turn our attention now to the Premier Ultimate League Regional Championship weekends. We've got 2 of the 3 happening this weekend. They're 3-team tournaments. One is happening in New York. One is happening up in Portland, Maine. The New York tournament features the New York Gridlock, the Washington, D.C. Shadow, and the Raleigh Radiance. Up in Portland, you'll have Portland Rising and a Medellin Revo Pro, now called Revo Pro, and the Austin Torch. So we've got another one coming up in 2 weeks out of Milwaukee. We will talk about that at that time. New York and Portland played scrimmage last weekend, Keith. And the Gridlock, I mean, as expected, really looked good. And I think should be clearly considered the favorite to win their tournament this weekend in New York. And I think if there was a bigger tournament, they are borderline maybe favored over Revo.
That to me, that second take is a bit spicy. Only because, they're the hot new flavor. Are you really gonna see this team win a scrimmage against a team that's literally never played a game before and be like,
I'm not
okay, they're favored over a juggernaut?
I'm looking at the roster and I'm seeing what is clear, which is that they're really stacked.
Yeah, but now that the scrimmage has confirmed your priors, you're like, oh, well, this scrimmage is useful information now. If it had gone the other way, you would have been like, disregard. It's an early season.
Falling.
Who cares? There you go.
So, well, I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, New York, not that DC and Raleigh aren't going to be good. They are. I think you could argue, Raleigh specifically is going to have more continuity. And that could play a factor. But I just feel like the New York team and like basically getting players from Philly, New York, and Boston, and like that whole metro area, like the best players from those cities are on this team. They're just going to be really hard to beat. I mean, they're superstar squad.
And let's not forget, they get to play every game at home. They just get a home series, right, basically. Which, sure, some of them are traveling, but it's going to be an advantage. You can't deny it. The fans are going to be rooting for them. So I think that New York is the definite favorite on paper, and probably beyond that. Like the roster's good. Could Cameron Groom, could she be the best player here? Like,
sure,
possibly, right? Who's going to argue with that? That's a big advantage when like you've got the trump card and you've got the depth. I think Raleigh, and I don't think any of these teams are going to be pushovers.
No.
I don't think we're going to see a lot of blowouts. There's some impressive players in the DC roster. So like, could they shock Raleigh and then Raleigh plays really close with New York so that you get a sense that all three teams are pretty close? Probably. Like, I think that could definitely happen. This to me feels like the most competitive of the three PUL lineups.
Sure. I agree.
So I'm excited to see these teams, which I think you have a little bit of room for variance because there's not a lot of reps. It isn't like the teams have had all season to kind of like figure this out. They're going to show up and try and play their best, and they've probably had a couple practices to work it out. But I think that maybe that means you want to lean on talent, but I think it's going to create an environment where there's inconsistency, and we could see the teams like all go 1-1. You know what I mean?
I really think that New York's gonna walk through, get 2 wins, and then win the championship game. I mean, look, it's just like Angela Zhu, Cammie Groom. How about Lindo Morris, who's been playing amazing like the last year and a half? You've got, I mean, all the folks from New York, Rahma Zafari, Abby Chang, B Cap, like the team is stacked. They're super stacked, and like they're both, the top end's really good and they're really deeper than the other teams, I think. So, and I think it's probably an advantage to have had a chance to play a competitive game before the weekend. So we will see. I mean, this Raleigh team certainly going to be very good, and Shadow, I mean, we kind of don't know like what it's going to look like, but it's an all-star DC team, and we know that there's incredible talent in the area. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Keith, you're going to be commentating on the live streams this weekend.
I'm fortunate that I'll be able to be there and get to take it all in person and talk with folks about it. But yeah, I think DC is probably the team that you have the lowest expectations for, not because of talent, but because we haven't really seen them together. They haven't had a real chance to get what this kind of almost one-off. This isn't quite one-off games like you would traditionally see, but that part will be a little bit different for them. And they're integrating some new pieces that are pretty good in Sarah Mextroth and Erica Bacon. Obviously, everything's a new piece for them, but some of these players to play together.
It's a good lineup. There's no question about it. Ashley,
so the talent's
Ashley
there.
But looked so great to start this year. They've got Jenny Fay, they've got Carolyn Normile, Sandy Jorgensen, Sarah Mextroth, Claire Trope on the team. So, I mean, I think the top end is there. I question a little bit more the depth that they have compared to a team like New York.
Well, Raleigh is the team that did the best last year.
That's a good point.
And there's some changes to the roster, so that I think could impact them in a negative way. But they also, I think, are going to be they probably are the most cohesive, I would expect, coming in after the experience that they had last year and the club experience that they've had together. So I think that'll be a point in their favor. I do agree with you, though. The Gridlock are going to be the favorites here. And certainly the I mean, would you pick them just to go undefeated here?
I would.
Do you think that they play any games with a margin of 3 or less?
I mean, I could see that, but I would bet against it.
Okay.
I would bet against it. I think they're 5 to 10 point favorites in most games. Yeah,
wow.
maybe that's
big lines.
Too much, but I mean, I think Portland's a pretty good team, and New York really put it to them.
It's going to be an interesting weekend. I don't expect a lot. I mean,
a big bummer for Raleigh.
So
we got to put it out there. Like Anworth torn ACL.
I can't even. I'm muted. I can't even listen to this.
It's awful. I mean, the soft tissue injuries. Like we knew it was going to be an issue coming out of the pandemic, and unfortunately, probably Raleigh's best player not going to be able to play this weekend. So, I mean, look, they're still good. No, there's no doubt. But I think that's a blow. And I'm certainly looking forward to watching, lots of these other players. Ashley Powell, Lindsay Sue, Mary Rippey, Tyler Smith, Jesse Jones. I mean, look, they're really good. And I think you can't just expect that New York is going to be able to just have a bad game and still win. I think these teams are all clearly good enough to beat each other if the other team plays its C game. And so, I mean, I think it's just that there's more margin for error for New York.
Raleigh's real handler heavy. I'll be curious to see how their cutters perform, because I feel like Ellie Youngst is going to be in a big role for them without Anworth. It makes the Anworth loss even more painful, I think, given that they have such strong cutters. And then they're getting Karen Earhart, who we really have not seen on an elite club level. So this kind of can function in that facsimile. Like, we get a sense of what she can do competing with top level players. If she comes out and has a strong performance as a cutter, that A, really will be helpful given the strength of the throwers on this team, but B, could portend for what we're going to see for her down the line in her career.
The Rising are solid. I don't think you should read too much into the fact that they lost in New York. Like they're going to be a tough out. I mean, lots of Boston talent, local talent as well. I mean, main scene is getting better and better all the time. Josie Gillette on the team. I was super impressed with Yuga Zhao, who was just like making crazy plays in the scrimmage. Check it out if you haven't. It's up on the Portland Rising YouTube channel. And we'll see how they match up with Revo. Revo going to be missing a couple people. Sounds like Manu Cardenas was not going to be there, but we know that this is, it's like the Colombian national team showing up. So I don't know how many pieces they're going to be missing. There's a little bit of uncertainty still about exactly who's going to be on the field, but they have the reigning MVP, and this is just it's a team that has been dominating the world stage for multiple seasons.
Oh, I'm excited to see Sophie Knowles. I want to see what Sophie Knowles can bring to the table. She's coming off the injury. She's on this Portland team now after being one of the best players in the league for Columbus in 2019. So I want to see what she can bring to the table, because if she's back to where she was before, I mean, this is a player who can take over a game against anybody, and getting to see her up against Revo can be really exciting. And then let's get the hype going for the kid, Emily Pazzi.
I was going to bring it up. You're bringing it up first.
On this Portland team. I mean, she's a playmaker. She's an athlete, and somebody who I think could be talking about for a long time. So this could be a breakout performance on the big stage.
Not going to a big college program, so maybe you're not going to get that buildup of hype in the college division. She's listed as going to Bishop's University, which I don't know either. I assume it's up in Maine. So, but don't get it twisted. Like, she would be one of the top 5-star recruits, going into college. She would be an instant starter on any team in the country at a D1 program. Very much super legit. One of the most exciting young players in years. Has been dominating for the main YCC teams, and I think is very clearly going to be somebody who is going to be a big contributor for the Rising. Can somebody beat this Revo team?
It's so hard to say without the rosters, but I talked in 2019 in the postseason about like what teams could do to beat this team. I think that they did not leave a lot of room for error. Then we got that incredible semifinal against Atlanta that showed that they were not infallible. True. But don't forget what they came out and did in the final. So I think if you had to, I don't see how you can argue against them being the favorite without evidence. Like if we saw a roster and it was like piecemeal, but the history of this team is a great core of the best, of being able to put like 3 or 4 of the best players in the entire game on the field, and just nobody can overcome that. And that happens all the time. So they don't need, even if they play without Manu, if they can put out Dina Cartagena and Elizabeth Mosquera, like most teams are not going to have 2 players that can guard both of them. And the other thing that we've seen from this team over and over and over is when they come to the US, people want to play with them. So I don't know who those players are going to be, but the history is them picking up really good players because people want to join them, and that they're a magnetic for talent. So would I be surprised if some big name players who aren't otherwise playing in the league pop up on their roster? Absolutely not. I would not be at all. And that fills in the gaps for them. So, if we see people who are like, I don't know, a couple random Fury players or whatever just show up, like that would not shock me. So I think you got to count that in when you're talking about this team. And to me, they're the favorite, certainly the favorite at their mini tournament. And should there be, or if we do a hypothetical champions tournament, to me, they're the favorite.
I remember that the 2020 roster had Claire Chastain, Jesse Schaffner, Lisbeth Keithley, that Denver connection, certainly connecting these teams. But, like you say, I mean, if Mosquera's there, Laura Ospina, Ximena Montaña, like they don't have to have their full squad to still be the favorite this weekend, I don't think. I mean, Mosquera, I'm super excited. Last time we saw Mosquera play was PAUK 2019, November 2019, and she was easily the best player at the Fields. Like a world-class, like maybe all-time, bordering on all-time great puller in the women's division, like unbelievable. And, increasingly adding more and more offensive skill to the athleticism that she's already brought to the game over the last almost, it feels like a decade now. I think, impossible to deal with and match up with. And so excited to see, I mean, hopefully she's playing. We haven't seen a roster, so we don't exactly know who's going to be out there this weekend. And so that does give a little bit of clouding uncertainty, but Valeria Cardenas too, incredible thrower, coming back after the ACL injury that she suffered back in the 2019 season, playing for Riot. Looking forward to seeing them back on the field and rocking the black and gold.
Definitely. And the new Revo Pro, it's a little awkward to me, Revo Pro. I feel like maybe they should have done Revo Am for the other team. Like, I don't know. I'm not used to, maybe that's a cultural thing. Like I just don't refer to teams like with the Pro, or I don't know. Maybe it's like calling them FC, I guess.
Well, remember how this all came up, right? They
oh no, I remember
during COVID and people were freaking out. And so they like created separation between them, their club team Revo and the pro team. A whole different name might have made sense. I don't know. I feel like Revo Pro rolls off the tongue decently well.
Is it like, to me, it's like Revo FC. I don't know. We'll see if I'm calling them Revo Pro this weekend or if it's just Revo ultimately. But maybe they could have done Revo versus Revolution. I don't know.
The other team up there is going to be the Austin Torch. I do think they'll be the underdog against these other 2 squads, but don't count them out. We've got some strong players in the Austin area, and this really brings people together too from, various teams. Julia Schmaltz, Sharon Sau, Drea Sparza, Katie Forth, who's just continues to be a great player no matter how long it's been. Laura Gerentzer, Caroline O'Connell. Like, this is like, the best of the best from Austin. Both the Forth sisters are playing. And, I don't know that they have the same top end talent as these other 2 teams. Let's just be honest about it. But they're going to have lots of knowledge of playing with each other. And maybe that will be enough.
And they're basically like a lot of the same team that they had in 2019. a lot of players who played together and like basically had all their touches last year. Amy Broom, Elise Bjork, like in primary handler roles. Now they get to integrate the fourth sisters into that. And then Julia Schmaltz and Sharon Sauer, two of the most exciting downfield players you're going to find out there. So I think a lot of their like most important pieces for 2019 are here, and that continuity could be a real strength for them.
Well, okay, let's make some picks, Keith. You got to pick your finalists and your champ for each of the 2 weekends.
All right. I think I'm going to be surprised if we have differences outside of. I mean, I'm going to take New York over Raleigh. Okay. Although maybe the injuries are too much. Yeah, no, I'm still going to go New York over Raleigh. And then on the other side, I'm going to go Revo over Portland.
I'm also going to go Revo over Portland. I'm going to go New York over DC.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be a good game. DC Raleigh is going to be a really good game. And we'll see what happens. That's going to be fun. I mean, it's weird, right? Because it's not a season. It's just like these teams that we mostly haven't seen, in some cases ever, and certainly not in 2 years, are going to come together and then like have these showcase games and, you know, crown these regional champs.
All right. Wait,
what?
Charlie, I have a Revo roster.
Breaking news.
Breaking news. Not a lot of American imports on this team. I'm scrolling through now. I do see Valeria, but no Manu. Okay. But they do have Levka Walczak.
Well, that's a nice pickup. She is very effective downfield. They also have Karen Rico, who I think they had signed for last season, but was not on the team in 2019. As well as Ospina, Aki Young, Lily Gu. Oh, Lily Gu.
So that they can fill out around, you know, the usual suspects, the Mosqueras, Alejandro Torres, Gina Cartagena, like they can fill in around that, I think.
Well, it's going to be fun to watch. You know, they had the big disadvantage in 2019 of coming to the U.S. and having to like go on an ultra long road trip where, you know, they were playing teams that they were clearly far more talented than, you know, out in the Midwest, and like not really winning by that much because they just looked fatigued. They had a small team. That is not going to be the case this weekend, right? They're coming in and they're playing 3 games and, you know, over the course of 3 days. So when you have that as kind of the backdrop, I think that they're more likely to do better than we saw what they had to do in 2019 when they had to fly to the U.S. twice, you know, once for championship weekend, once for their long road trip. And that's just hard. That's harder to do. You know, still long travel. Don't get me wrong.
Is it going to be mad hot? It has been hot in Connecticut.
It's very hot in New
3
York.
days.
Let's take a look at the weather. Unfortunately, I think there's potentially some rain in the forecast. It's going to be 86 on Saturday, 88 on Friday. There's a Friday night game up in Portland, and 78 on Sunday with rain in the forecast in the early afternoon in Portland, scattered thunderstorms. So hopefully that doesn't disrupt play. In New York this weekend, I mean, it's probably going to be warmer than that. You know, we're not up in Maine. It's going to be 88 on Saturday with some rain and beautiful 83 on Sunday. So really the heat's going to break. It's 96 today and tomorrow, but we're going to
let's hope they're on grass.
I'm going to the stadium later today. I don't know if they're going to be on grass or turf. I would expect it to be turf.
Could be a warm one. At least in New York.
All right, so those are our picks. We now get to make our AUDL picks, and we're going to just leave it to stall 7 to give you the recap of this week. It was a weird week because a lot of teams were missing a lot of players to the US Open. We talked about Tampa getting the win over Atlanta in our subscriber bonus segment because we're doing our subscriber bonus segment this week. We're talking about betting on the AUDL and DraftKings and some of the trends we've seen so far this year. So if you're interested in hearing more about the lines or sports betting trends or just thinking about betting on the league in general, join us for our subscriber bonus segment. You can become a subscriber for less than $4 a month at ultiworld.com/subscribe. So we're still waiting to figure out how things are going to shake out, Keith, in the Atlantic Division. Very interesting. You've got 3 teams at 2 losses, Raleigh at 3 losses, Raleigh playing Atlanta this weekend. New York still with a bunch of games to play in their season. We don't really know who's going to be hosting the playoff games yet. And we may not know that until all the chips settle in the final week. So that's pretty interesting. Of course, over in the Central, Chicago and Minnesota, it's a done deal. That's going to be our matchups in that division, barring some crazy results. It may not even be possible at this point. I think it's locked up. And out west, Dallas getting the win over Austin means that they're through into the playoffs and going to be playing in San Diego. So we're just really waiting on the Atlantic at this point. Let's get to this week's lines. Give them to us, Keith.
Well, did you acknowledge that I think we went 3-0 last week?
We did. We went 3-0, and the Stall 7 guys changed their pick last minute to Dallas -1.5 and Austin.
Oh, that's a great idea. I'm glad that they did that.
They tried to make an illegal pick. They decided that they set the rules and that it was acceptable, and they took the L for it. So tough.
You love to
We've extended our lead. They went 1-3.
Yeah, love it. All right, so this week, let's just start with the heavy hitter, Charlie, because this is where I think we got to talk it out. Atlanta traveling to Raleigh. It's a pick'em. We gotta make heads or tails of this age-old rivalry.
Pick the winner. So let's recap. Atlanta beat Raleigh by 1 in Raleigh week 1. I don't put almost any stock in that game.
Yeah, that's almost throw it out the window territory.
I think it's fair to say that Atlanta's been the better team. Raleigh, with the brutal loss to New York, up 2 with 40 seconds left, and they.
Can we briefly just acknowledge how unbelievably bad it is to lose that game? Charlie, I'm one of those people who I never turn the sports game off. Like the Hawks are down 22 in the third, and I'm like, look, I don't want to miss it if they come back. But I turned it off. I accidentally hit the button that turns off my Roku TV's AUDL streaming. I was like, by the time it reloads, the game's probably over. There's 40 seconds left. They're up 2. This is a wrap. And then I texted you and I'm like, oh, did you see New York choke that game away? And you're like, they're about to win. And I was like, what? How do you lose up 2 with 43 seconds left?
I guarantee you they're working on that in practice this week. Hey, maybe we shouldn't
not throwing hammers directly to defenders. Is that what they're working on? You can't work on this. This is here.
Reset, fam. It's really not that hard.
Oh my gosh! What's your win probability at that point? 99?
Yeah, if you had the thing, it would have been squiggly, and then it just goes to the bottom.
Oh my gosh! Unreal.
They had a chance to pull
one
out
of one of the greatest chokes in AUDL history.
They had the disc, I think, twice on Universe in double overtime, and they just couldn't get it done.
And let me tell you, New York tried to hand it to him. New York was up 1, had Jeff Babbitt, one of the greatest deep threats on earth, streaking deep, and John Lithgow just totally misses him. No, I don't think there was a defender on either of them. Basically, there was just a guy floating in between them, wide open. New York tried to give them this game, and Raleigh was like, "No, you can have it back."
It was crazy. Anyway, does this mean that you want to pick Atlanta this week?
Oh man, it kind of does. I'm talking myself into it, getting myself all worked up. But honestly, I think Raleigh's got a lot to play for. And after last week, they're going to want to come out and prove to people we are no joke. They also have this rivalry. They lost game 1. I feel like Raleigh's got the motivation that maybe Atlanta doesn't. They're coming off of this nobody's at this game lost to Tampa. So I don't know, are the guys going to be invested?
The story.
I feel like I want to take Raleigh.
The story would be different if they'd beaten Tampa because they would only have one loss and they would feel pretty comfortable about hosting a playoff game. Now they're at the point where if they lose here, they very well may not host a playoff game. And that's a much worse situation to be in. You know, I don't care what team you are. You want to be playing at home for the first round of the playoffs. It's hard because I think like on a neutral site,
they're in Raleigh too.
Atlanta should be like 1.5, maybe 2 point favorites. They're on the road. The
and that's
line
about
feels right.
Yeah.
It's really tough.
Yeah.
I feel like it's hard to beat a team twice. We've seen it this season. You know, DC comes into Atlanta and stomps them, and then Atlanta returns a favor in DC. I guess I'm with you, Keith. I don't love it, but I think it's a spot where Raleigh's got an opportunity to kind of like lick their wounds a little bit and learn from game one and really study up on the Z. I feel like they have the personnel to beat the Atlanta defense. They also know the team extremely well. They've mostly dominated the hustle in years past. They played abnormally bad in week one. They've certainly played much better since then. I think I'm with you. I think we take Raleigh, but I definitely don't feel great about it.
Nope. I'm with you. I want to take Raleigh with a slight edge, but it's not like I like feel super confident here.
I think
I wouldn't bet this. This isn't going in my best bets.
I think you just say Raleigh's at home. Let's take the home team.
Yeah.
Okay. What's next?
We've got San Diego -5 traveling to Los Angeles.
Oh, San Diego literally has nothing to play for. I guess neither does LA. 5's a pretty big number. My lean is LA +5.
Sorry, I think San Diego's at home.
Okay.
I misspoke. San Diego -5
really changes my opinion. I still think the 5's maybe too big a number. That's my initial.
Yeah, that's a pretty big line. LA, are they in the bad team category? Because they're 3-1 against the spread this year. 5's a lot. I think I want to take LA there. I see a low total on this game too. I think it's the second lowest total of the week. It's always going to favor smaller
What's
spreads.
happened between these two teams this season? Let's look back at the results. Did they just play this past weekend? They did, right? It was a weird game because there were a bunch of people missing. San Diego won by 7.
Yeah.
It was 24-17. Earlier this season, San
Diego won by
the
3.
first 2 weeks of the year. It was a 3-point win for San Diego, and then there was that shocking LA win 2018 in San Diego. So no, this game is in LA. Yeah, it's in LA.
It?
I don't know how it's being listed on there, but
Yeah,
it's definitely in LA.
Let's take
I think
LA
so
then.
too. I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah, LA is going to be a much better roster than they had last week. And, given
Agreed.
that San Diego has more reason to sit starters and stuff than LA. Like LA is playing for pride. San Diego's thinking about the first round of the playoffs at this point. So
yeah. I think all this says we should roll with LA here.
+5 it is.
All right, our last pick, Minnesota and Indy. Minnesota 3.5 point favorites here.
Hammer, Minnesota. Might be one of my best bets this week.
Little preview. They're in Indy. They played a 1 point game last that was 2 weeks ago.
That was some skeleton.
They played a 1 point game
squad
in Minnesota.
I don't put a lot of stock in that. I think that this Minnesota team is clearly better. I mean, again, you have the situation where it's like Minnesota doesn't really have a lot to play for at this point, but I just think they're clearly more than 3.5 point favorite. Like the line should be 5.5.
Does it change your mind if I think that they played within that one without Travis Carpenter?
I mean, not really.
I think. Okay.
But do you want to take Indy here?
I think I'm with you on. No, I'm just trying to think at all the angles because we also had what has Minnesota got to play for here? Like they have that same San Diego. Like maybe we're a little chill. We're on the road. Maybe we don't send the whole team. I don't know. Is this a trap? Is what I'm trying to figure out. Because I'm with you. This looks like a great line on its face. So is it a trap?
I mean, it is the second game of a back-to-back. They play Detroit on Saturday and then Indy on Sunday.
Does it really count as a back-to-back if it's Detroit?
I mean, it's just a lot of driving, right? That's a lot of mileage to have to put down. It is a trap.
And more reason for some people to more reason for some people to sit out the weekend is be like, I'm just not going.
I think you rest people against Detroit and you play. I think the thing is you don't want to just like try to coast into the playoffs because then it's hard to get up and play. So like I think they're going to target this Indy game and say, hey, we want to play hard. We want to go out there. We want to play our best game. They're missing a bunch of people last weekend because of Sub-Zero playing at the US Open. And so I think that they're going to come out and win that game by 5 or 6. I mean, they beat them by 7 last time they played in Indy.
That's true. All right, I'm with you. Let's take Minnesota here. Let's go with the wind chill. But I think that there's a little bit to think about on this line, even if it looks great.
If roster comes out and it looks bad, right?
We can always just change our pick after the game is over.
That's what Stall said.
You can just change your picks whenever you want.
To do. They just want to.
Yeah, we're going to play by your rules, Stall 7.
All right,
it's all good. Look. Let's just get it out there. Detroit is a cover machine. They're the biggest winners of this DraftKings thing. Detroit 3-0, baby. Keep betting Detroit.
You gotta love it. I got them at 10.5 against that. Like
I just like a chance to hype up Detroit. Yeah, I like to imagine Detroit out there betting on themselves and like this. Now we don't have to win the game to win the game. You know what I mean? Like,
all right, that's gonna do it for this week's edition of Deep Look. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be breaking down all the PUL action next week, so join us for that. And check out our subscriber bonus segment as we talk a little bit more about the early sports betting trends in the AUDL. For Keith Raynor, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we'll talk to you next week.